Lol. Okay. Cool. Okay, give me a link so that way I know what I'm doing. Apparently, I am currently streaming right now, so that's great fun.
Hello.
Howdy.
Hello to the internet, because this is currently live. Do you want me to start this for you?
Sure. Let's do it.
Alrighty. Hi everyone, it is Rhodey here for TSAC Retro Round 7. This time we're at Montreal for the circuit Gilles Villeneuve, famous F1 circuit and the famous, not from many other things, but I suppose Canada's biggest circuit and probably one of the best street circuits out there. I'm Rhodey. I will not be running the stream for you. This stream will be looked after by Michael Zalavari, aka Floodman. Floody, you want to say hello?
Hello. I'm sorry for not jumping on properly earlier. I was not sure that the stream was actually started, but here we are.
Yeah, we're doing a bit of a funny thing. I am not. Floody does have admin privileges in the service. If he needs me, he can drag me up into TV time to try and fill some air. But my results last time when I tried to commentate and drive were not great. I'm no Dick Johnson.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. So I am going to be sitting TV time and trying my best to race properly. But if you need me, you've got the privileges to drag me up here.
Good.
But yeah, so Floody's going to drag you through things. And if he doesn't need me between now and the end of the race, and I'm not going to get a podium, so I won't be here for interviews. Hope you guys enjoy the stream.
Yes, thank you very much, Rhodey. Thank you for running the stream again for us. Unfortunately, yet again, Chris, our good friend Kiwi Chris, is tied up with work once again, and which has been the reason that we haven't been able to do the last few rounds together. But no fear, you'll be able to listen to me yammer on for the next hour or so, maybe a bit longer, for this evening's TCAC round 8, I think we are actually at, for Montreal. This is the second of the single race events for TCAC Retro. And after this, we've only got 3 more rounds left at Oran Park, Alton Park, and Santa Cruz do Sol, rounding out the series. So before we get into qualifying, there is just a little bit of an interesting twist on the qualifying format tonight. So firstly, we are having I think it's a 20-minute qualifying session, but it's going to be like a pseudo shootout is the idea. So basically what's going to happen is everyone's going to go out, one person's going to go out at 30-second intervals. And so the idea is you get a out lap, a hot lap, and that's it. So the idea of trying to sort of reduce the clutter on track and try and do a pseudo shootout. After that, we have a 1-hour race, and that will be all of tonight's action. As Rhodey said, we are at the circuit Gilles Villeneuve in Canada, in Montreal. This is one of my favorite F1 tracks, just by the way. It just somehow produces some quality racing every single time out. And I think it's because of its kind of half street, half circuit sort of nature. You know, it's technically a street circuit in that it's public roads for the rest of the, for most of the year. But you can... It's got a really nice character about it. There's these concrete walls very, very close by, especially in turns 3 and 4 in the chicane there, which is one of my favorite parts of a racetrack in the world, let alone on this circuit. And then, of course, the run down the final long straight, the casino straight into the final chicane, the famous Wall of Champions, so named because all the champions that have ever raced have crashed at that corner. It is one of my favorite tracks, and it's seen some unbelievable racing and unbelievable moments. I think it's also seen the longest modern F1 race, which was something like 4.5, 5 hours, where I think Jenson Button won the race after taking 2 pit lane drive-through penalties or something like that. What a wild race. So that's probably one of my favorite moments. That was in 2011, I believe. Another one of my favorite moments, as we've got Rhodey just coming onto the track to start his outlap, is the 2014 F1 race, the race which Daniel Ricciardo won. I think it was his first victory in F1. Of course, big moment for the Australian, and as an Australian fan, it was friggin' cool to watch, especially in that season of crazy Mercedes overblown power. Now, while Rhodey is doing his outlap, he is just currently up to the Sector 2 marker now. We'll just go through the qualifying format once again. As I said, everyone is going to be released onto the track in 30-second increments, I think. 30-second, or it might even be 1 minute increments. I haven't actually seen the next driver out on track at this point in time. So it may be that they're spreading it out a bit more. But while Rhodey's warming up his tyres and doing all that jazz, we'll give you a bit of an overview on where the sector markers are on this circuit. So the first sector is from the front straight and ends just before turn 6. So it's the second sort of back chicane, the much more open one. And then Sector 2 runs from there through the 6-7 chicane into the much tighter 8-9 chicane underneath the bridge, and then into the hairpin at the top of the circuit. And then Sector 3 is the exit of the hairpin, that long drag down Casino Straight and into the final chicane, and of course past the Wall of Champions. Now, it looks like we've got Ozrob next in line to jump out of the pits. So he will be the next one to start his lap. And then it looks like everyone's just jumping out of the garage now to just sort of order up at the end of the pit lane. And so we'll see how that goes, and I'll keep you updated on the order as they pop out. So Ozrob is just starting his outlap while Rhodey comes across the line. And so we'll just track Rhodey across his first sector. We won't do an onboard lap yet with Rhodey because I don't think, no offense to Rhodey, but I think it'll be a bit more useful to do that for someone else a bit later on in the session. But he seems like he's got a very, very good exit out of the first corner complex. We were looking at lap times around the 2:04 mark in practice. I think the best lap time was a 2:03.3 set by Devonish and Scott Nolan. Unfortunately, some of our regulars aren't going to be here tonight either. So I think Brendan Hobson is missing out. Brian Walsh, I believe, as well, is not in the mix as Rhodey comes into the turn 6-7 open flowing chicane. He's actually doing quite a good job keeping clear of the lines at the edge of the circuit, but he's not put it in the wall. He's not oversteered anywhere yet. So he's doing a decent job as of yet. So yeah, look for the 203s from the guys at the head of the field, and 204s, 205s were generally what some other people were doing. So it looks like we've also got Luke Joyner out on track and Cam Rutledge. So the first 4 drivers across the line will be Rhodey, Ozrob, Luke Joyner, and then Cam Rutledge. And then it looks like Mike Coulston in the Saudi Camel will be the next one out. So Rhodey's just coming up to finish his lap now. He's coming around the hairpin. He set a 1:20 to the second sector. Now he's got to get that little Dallara. Is it a Dallara? Or is it? No, sorry, it's the Opal. He's got to get that little Opal. No, it is the Dallara. My bad. He's got to get that Dallara hoofing down the back straight, down towards the Wall of Champions. So this is the benchmark time for this session. We've got a 37.3 to the first sector, a 43.1 in the second sector. And as he bounces over, he's cut the track, and that's might delete his time. No, it hasn't. Very lucky. He's gone well over the curbs in the Wall of Champions, and it's going to be a 2:10. 2:10. No, it did delete his time, unfortunately. So that's a 0. No time for Rhodey. So we'll grab Ozrob now. Ozrob's just coming through the turn 3-4 chicane. So he's on the back half of the circuit, heading towards sector 2. And he's got a 35-4 to the first sector. So already 2 seconds up on Rhodey's time as he flows it through turns 6 and 7 into the waterfront section of the lap. Of course, Circuit of Montreal is actually built on an island, I think, in the Montreal Basin. So it's actually got a lake on one side of it, I do believe, or it might even be the sea as Ozrob goes through the chicane at turns 8 and 9, the very tight entry, and it opens out on exit. Ozrob, of course, is in the JP Sim Shed Rothmans inspired Porsche. And he's currently, I think, fifth in the championship. He hasn't actually had a good result for a while. Yeah, he's sitting behind Scott Nolan, Termo, Will Devonish, and Brenton Hobson, who isn't here tonight, as he rounds the hairpin at the top of the circuit. Again, 41-2 in the middle sector, so very much up on Rhodey's time. We've got Luke Joyner on his flying lap as well. He's actually not quite gotten onto Ozrob's time, and he runs a little wide through turn 8 on his lap. It's 35-5 in the first section for Luke Joyner, and Cam Rutledge is also on his first flying lap. He's about to hit the first sector mark, but we'll catch Ozrob. He's actually hit the wall of champions. He's hit the wall of champions coming through the final corner. So he's gone over the curb on the inside. He's missed the curb on the inside, and it's oversteered, and he's just sent him into the wall. So far, no one's actually set a lap yet. So Luke Joyner now is in the box seat to take a provisional pole position. He was a second outside Ozrob's first sector. Cam Rutledge had a shocking first sector. He was down in the 39s. And so Ozrob actually sets the fastest time of the session, but it is a 2:15.9. That is the fastest time so far. And there's a yellow flag in sector 1, which Mike just goes through, and I'm pretty sure that is for Ozrob. So we'll try and find everyone else on track. Luke Joyner actually has made it through on the final corner, so he will be the first to set flying lap in the MHRT Tirana, a black and red striped Tirana in this case, and it's a 2:07.7. So that's the first proper indication that we're going to get for this session. So next across the line will be Cam Rutledge. He had a shocking first sector, and his second sector was a bit better, actually. It's 41.5, so not the cracking pace of Ozrob, but very, very close to it. In fact, if it wasn't for his first sector, he'd probably be looking at a provisional pole here. So it looks like Mike Coulston's on a flying lap as well. How did Mike go on the first sector? 35.4. So actually, only about half a tenth away from the fastest in the first sector. So Mike Coulston is going to be one to watch. Steve Bolger is on his outlap. Scott Nolan on his outlap as well. And Luke Joyner is still at the top. Cam Rutledge dropped in at a 12.0 for his lap. So I'm going to try and find it. I think it's only Mike Coulston on his flying lap at the moment. So I'll catch up with Mike. He is coming down the back stretch. How was his middle sector? 41.1 in the middle sector. So that's the fastest middle sector that we've seen so far. So he could be on to knock off the provisional pole position time as he makes his way into the final chicane, braking hard just past the pit entry line, hits the curb on the inside, rides the curb very nicely on the outside, gets it turned down the front straight, and that little yellow Alfa Romeo, the Saudi Camel, is going to cross the line, and he's going to be quickest. It's going to be a 2:05.4 for Mike Coulston. So that is now the quickest time that we have seen on this session. So we've got Steve Bolger on his hot lap now. So we'll jump on board with Steve Bolger. He's just gone through the first section. It's in the chicane in turns 3 and 4, rides out to the outside, very nicely done there. Now up the back stretch, we're going to see the first sector time very shortly, and it is a 34.7. He's up by 7/10 of a second on Mike Coulston's lap time as he brakes for the middle chicane. Very tight entry at turn 6, and then again opens up on the outside at turn 7. Now we've got the inverse coming up, the turn 8-9 chicane, a very tight right-hander coming up as we come under the bridge, and Steve Bolger brakes just before the 100 marker, gets the nose tucked in, rides the curb very nicely, and then the car bounces its way through turn 9. Concrete wall right on the exit of turn 9, the sweeping left-hander. Now, we're heading up to the second sector marker now. How is his lap time? And it is a 1:15.7, so 8 tenths up on the pole time so far as he gets it turned, slowed and turned very nicely for the hairpin. Now it's all about straight line speed. How is this BMW going to go down the back straight? We will find out, as Scott Nolan is just about to start his lap as well. So we'll actually jump on board with Scott Nolan if we can, if I can remember my buttons. I can't remember my buttons, it seems, because I already missed his start. So that's all right. We'll catch up with him later on. Steve Bolger, purple first sector, purple second sector, coming into the final chicane now. Does a very nice job over the curves, rides all the way out to the wall. That's a very, very good run through that final chicane. Now, what lap time is he going to get? He's going to dip into the 204s. It's going to be close. It's 204.2. A full second up on Mike Coulson. So that sends Steve Bolger to the very top of the timesheets in his orange and green BMW. Car out on track at the moment is Scott Nolan. He didn't have the best first sectors. He was only 2/100ths outside, 2/10ths outside as he comes under the bridge into turns 8 and 9. Again, braking just before the 100 board as he hits the shadow. Catch how he is doing on this lap. Nicely done over the curb and on both sides. Very clean, very smooth exit. Not a lot of curb taken there. Not a lot of bouncing. So Scott Nolan, of course, in the Synergy Sim Racing Porsche for this event. Number 18 car. His teammate is not here, Brenton Hobson, the current championship leader. And Scott Nolan just crosses the Sector 3 marker. And he is 2 tenths up on the time set by Steve Bolger. So we could see the Porsche represented at the top of the field as he gets a little bit of wheel spin on the exit. Now he's dragging the car down the long straight heading into the final chicane. So this could be another car to the jump to the provisional pole here. So it's a 34.9 and a 40.5, very, very quick middle sector. In fact, half a second quicker than Steve Bolger as Scott Nolan comes into the final chicane, hits the anchors hard. Is he going to do well? He hits the curb over the first part of the chicane, gets it stopped nicely through the middle, and then shoots it out the outside. It's a very clean sector. Not as clean as Steve Bolger, but he's taking the short line into the line. And it's just at the top, a 4.2. Our Steve Bolger by 47 thousandths of a second. So we've got 2 new entries tonight for this event. It looks like we've got Josh Ben in the Ringer 6 Porsche, which has just started his hot lap, and we've got Lewis Wedding in a Alfa Romeo, dirtied up Alfa Romeo. So we'll see how they go tonight. Josh Ben and Lewis Wedding, of course, drivers, at least I recognize from the GT3 challenge run by Automobilista Australia. In fact, Lewis Wedding runs that series, so it's good to see them take a bit of a dip into what we've got here at OZTCAC. Josh Ben, a little bit of a lockup, just entering the first chicane, the one at turns 3 and 4, and his sector mark is just half a second away from the fastest time set so far. What we'll do actually is we'll jump on board with Lewis Wedding as he starts. I know. Coming into the first section, hugs the right-hand side, gets on the brakes at the 100 marker, clips the left-hander at turn 1, and then it's a slow, long right-hander that is turn 2. Does a decent job there. Got a little bit too deep into turn 1, but as he comes over the crest at turn 2, keeps the wheel spin down very nicely, and he's on the brakes for this right-left chicane at turn 3, using all of the curb on the right there, and then rides the car out over the turn 4 curb. Didn't use all the road there as he comes up through the first sector marker, and his time is 7 thousandths of a second down on the fastest time. So Lewis Wedding very, very quick as he brakes for the turn 5-6 chicane. Left first, then right, using the curb on the inside, not using all the road on the outside. The Alfa Romeo not really having the power to really make use of all that road on the outside as he sweeps along the coastline into the sector 2 marker. Under the bridge for turns 8 and 9. Just nicks that large curb on the inside of turn 8 and then rolls the car through turn 9. Again, not using all the curb in the exit of turn 9, the long left-hander. but it arrows the car very nicely down towards the hairpin. Sector time at the hairpin, just as he hits the brakes, it is 3/10 outside, so not nearly as clean as Scott Nolan was, and a little bit of a lock up in the rears through the final corner. The hairpin. Now, the Alfa Romeo down the back straight isn't quite going to have the same sort of punch through the air as the Porsche does, but Lewis Wedding's got a decent run out, and while he's done that, Josh Bender's finished this lap. He's finished up in 6th with a 13.3 last sector, the problem for Josh Ben. We're still on board with Lewis Wedding as we come into the final corner. He hits the anchors. He's gone a bit too deep. It's understeered, but he's got the front gathered up over the last corner. He just hit the curb a little too hard there, and it's compromised his exit. So he might not quite have the pace to lead the qualifying. And in fact, he got a track cut. So he missed that entirely. Oh, that's a big shame for Lewis Wedding. He just got too far under brakes in that final corner, too deep under brakes rather, and it sent the car too much forward into that chicane, and he had to take too much of the curb on the second part of the chicane to get his lap counted. Looks like we got Cracker on track now for his lap, a 35.3 in the first sector, so not quite as quick as the likes of Steve Bolger and Scott Nolan, but definitely respectable. He is it's going to be, in fact, him, Brock Harvey, Termo, and Will Devonish, I think, to finish off the session for us. And in fact, Brock Harvey, has just had a big crash starting his lap. He's hit the wall of champions on the start of his lap, so that's going to be compromising his run into the session for that one. But we're with Cracker now. He's about a second outside the top time as he comes into the hairpin at the tail end of the circuit. Now his run down the long straight shouldn't be too bad, actually. Only a little bit of wheel spin on the exit there, but a second outside, I don't think he'll be able to jump Nolan and Steve Bolger. We'll catch up with Brock Harvey and watch him through the first sector. Very, very nicely done over the curbs in the first sector. Not looking like that touch of the wall has troubled him too much. In fact, he's up by a 10th in the first sector over Scott Nolan. So very, very good first sector for Brock Harvey as he runs the Camaro through the curbs. And that's going to be, I think, one of the big things about making pace at this track. Just making sure that where you can use the curbs, you do use the curbs, and then making sure to stay off the big sausage curb that's on the inside of places like here, where we're at turn 8, where Brock Harvey, again, very smooth through the turn 8 section, misses the curb on the inside and then rides the curb very nicely at turn 9. So Brock Harvey is looking very nicely controlled. He's 2/10 down, though, on that amazing Sector 2 by Scott Nolan, and he's got a bit of a swapper on through the hairpin, so maybe compromising his exit down this long straight. So we'll leave Brock down the straight and we'll catch up with Termo. Termo's just about to hit the first sector marker in his Tirana, and he's half a second up on that lap. Wow, half a second up on Scott Nolan's first sector, a 34.4. So that's easily the fastest first sector we've seen as Termo runs the Tirana all the way out of the turn 7 chicane there, the right-hander opener, and runs under the bridge into the turn 8-9 chicane. He's using all of the road, actually, all the way out to the white lines. He's gone a little deep there, and he's run over the sausage curb on the turn 9 left-hander. So we'll see whether or not that puts a jeopardy onto his lap time. Meanwhile, Brock Harvey's jumped up to 3rd with a 24.5. So no one in the 3s yet. Termo's still getting sector times. He's only 1/10 ahead, and he's got the wheels lit up outside of the hairpin. In fact, I'll just have a quick look at that again. So on the entry, he's actually locked up the inside front wheel. He's missed the apex quite a long way, and then he's lit up the rears to try and get that time back. So not the best of laps from Termo, not the best of last sectors, but he is still up by a 10th of a second as we come into the final chicane for Termo here. He's going to hit that curb well over the curbs on the inside and the outside. Now, has he got a track cut there? That's going to be very, very close to see if he got a track cut, because he was definitely over the sausage curb on both ends. It looks like the time's still ticking down, and he's gone to the top, a 2:04 flat. So 2/10 up on Scott Nolan. Now, next one to keep an eye on is Will Devonish. Will Devonish, a purple first sector, actually, a 34.4 flat instead of a 34.45. So he's doing very, very well on this lap. Now, Will was the only driver besides Scott Nolan to get into the threes in practice. So we'll see how his lap comes up as he's up to the second sector mark, and it's a 1:14.9, half a second up. So he's matched Scott Nolan's second sector mark, which no one else has been able to do. He gets a very clean exit out of the hairpin. So now it's all him in this Opel GT down the back straight. Now, this could be the pole lap that we've got here. He's going to be the last one on circuit as well. So it's all down to Will. All eyes on Will here as he flies down the casino straight. Now, let's see how he goes through the final corner complex. Brakes it very nicely. He's hit the sausage curb on the inside, but it hasn't unsettled the car too bad. He's gotten all the power down on the exit very cleanly there. Now, Will Devonish goes to the line. This could be a 203, ladies and gentlemen. Is it going to make it? Yes, a 203.6, and that is the pole time for the session. So Will Devonish will start tonight's 1 hour race at Montreal on pole position. And that is a very, very good lap. The closest one to the practice laps that we saw from earlier tonight. So congratulations to Will. And so we'll just run through the grid while we've got a second here. It is going to be Will Devonish on pole, Termo on the second slot on the grid. Scott Nolan, Steve Bolger in the Synergy Sim Racing Porsche, and the BMW out of third and fourth. Brock Harvey in fifth, Crackers BMW in sixth, Mike Coulston, the Saudi Camel in seventh, Luke Joyner in eighth, Cam Rutledge ninth, Josh Ben, a new addition to the series, in 10th. Oz Rob crosses the line in 11th, and then Glenn Miles, who didn't run a lap, will be 12th. And then the two track cutters, Rhodey and Lewis Wedding, will run out of the back row of the grid. Now, we've got a little bit of time before the race starts, so while that happens, I'm going to have an opportunity to go grab a quick drink. Then I'll run through the championship scenarios for this race. Back in a sec. Okie dokie, welcome back. It looks like we've got about 10 minutes before the race is due to start. So what I'll do is I'll just give everyone a quick overview on the championship so far. So at the moment, the top driver in the championship is still Brenton Hobson. He's got a 23-point buffer over Will Devonish. And then it is Termo only 2 points back. Now, what we've been doing in this championship is we've actually been removing the lowest round for each driver. So that's actually why the gap at the front is so small, because Brenton Hobson's worst round is much, much better than everyone else's best round. So if we're talking grand total points, Brenton Hobson has an almost 50-point lead, but with the round removed, it is only a 23-point lead. Scott Nolan is also only 2 points behind Termo, and then it is Oz Rob in fifth, let me do some maths. 10 points behind Scott Nolan. That was some very, very bad maths. So the interesting thing is, though, with Brenton Hobson not being here and Damien Rasmussen also not being here for tonight, it means that we're going to see some drivers at the top possibly take more weight on board. Now, that's going to probably be the likes of maybe Termo and Will Devonish, because Brenton Hobson and Scott Nolan are already at the 50-kilogram weight maximum. Of course, if you haven't been following the series, there's specific performance adjustments for the drivers. So if you finish on the podium, you get weight added to your car for the remainder of the series. So first place is 15 kilos, second place 10 kilos, third place 5 kilos. That's sort of bring the field together and kind of promote close racing, especially as there's a variation of skill levels within the group. So Brendan Hobson and Scott Nolan, the two synergies in racing cars, are at that that weight maximum already. Will Devonish, having only taken 2 third places throughout the series, only has 10 extra kilos on that Opel GT. So with Brendan Hobson not being here, Scott Nolan at the weight limit, and the likes of Ozrob and Termo also carrying heavier weight, it's likely that Will's going to get a bit more weight added to his car. On the other hand, for guys like Mike Coulston, Luke Joyner, who have actually had weight taken off their car for finishing the bottom 3 positions, again, last finisher gets 15 Ks removed, second to last 10 kilos, and third to last 5 kilos. They actually have a pretty good opportunity to actually make a decent result out of this race and get a maximum points yield with a minimum weight penalty. And just as a sidebar, for the likes of Josh Ben and Lewis Wedding, who have joined after the start of the series, they are actually getting hit with a full 50 kilo weight penalty as a penalty for not running the full series, which I think is fair enough. It wouldn't be fair for the likes of, say, Lewis Wedding, who is one of the top drivers in the GT3 series, to just waltz in here with no weight penalty and kind of destroy everyone. So last round out at Interlagos was a round that was not broadcast, unfortunately. So we didn't get any replays from that one. We haven't done any sort of coverage for that one, which is a bit of a shame. Apparently the racing was absolutely off the hook. In the first race, we saw Steve Bolger take the win ahead of, I think it's Scott Nolan and Lime Mitch. So Lime Mitch's first race back in a fair while, actually. And then the second race, it was Brenton Hobson from Termo and Will Devonish. So that was Will Devonish's second podium position finish. Interestingly, the maximum points getter from that round was actually Steve Bolger with a first and a fifth, who got more points than everyone except for Scott Nolan, who had a second and a fourth. So interesting sort of mix now that I'm actually looking at the finishing positions. Surprising for me is Brenton Hobson getting ninth in the first race, which was a little interesting. Remember, the second race would have been random grid as well, so that would have shaken things up. And it sounds like I've got someone in here with me. Who is that? That's Scott Nolan. Hi, Scott.
Oh, g'day. I was just listening to your commentary there.
Thank you. Thank you for dropping in. I just want to while you're here, I might as well have a quick chat with you. It was pretty great. The middle sector especially. I think you set the fastest middle sector throughout the session. Give us a run on your lap from your perspective.
It was a pretty non-eventful lap. Just, middle sector was good. First sector, the tyres take about 2 laps to come up, so they were pretty cold still. And I also hit the curb awkwardly. The Porsche doesn't like the curbs at all. Looked like the Opel likes it a lot better. Which is, it's just a quirkiness as to the different makes. The models would be pretty pointless if they're all the same.
Exactly.
So the Opel likes the curves a bit better. Mine doesn't. So the run onto the straight was disadvantaged. And then I just didn't want to get a track car. I didn't want to be down the order with, battling, especially while I knew that not just with Lewis, but just with the other boys. Like, tonight's a good night to sort of bring it back into Brenton, although even with this being his drop round, you'll still have a pretty good lead. But also I'm trying to get up there and jump the 2 ahead of me as well, after I've had some poor finishes in the past. So the lap was pretty non-eventful. But yeah, we punched out a good middle sector and a half decent last sector, and just summer at the front was what we wanted.
Yeah, so I think you're walking off third off the grid. Just for a bit of context, I've got the numbers in front of me. With Brenton getting a 0 for this round, that means his total with the round removed will be 272 points, which is his current grand total point score. At the moment, your grand total point score is 216 points, so that's a bit of a gap. But on top of that, the gaps between yourself, Termo, and Will Devonish is only 2 points between each of you. So that's a very, very tight battle pack as we approach the last few rounds of the series. So good to get a leg up on Termo at least, and an eye towards Will.
It'll all just depend on the point structure. Is actually you don't lose that many points from finishing, not winning. So, but if we can gain the maximum of fifth and of 50 points, then that'd be good. But yeah, look, we're just hopefully finish up the race. It's 60 minutes. It's going to be a long race. it's going to be interesting to see if anyone does any more than one stop or do more than 2 tyres. I don't really care. I'll say it. I'm going to do 1 stop, and I'm only going to change 2 tyres. So I feel like the tyre wear is pretty good. So yeah, that's all I'm doing. And where I take that stop will just depend on whether I'm in traffic or whether I'm got a bit of clear air. Then we'll see.
Cool. So not expecting to have to pit twice for fuel.
No, I think once.
How long do you reckon that fuel stint will be? Like 35, 40 minutes?
Not sure, to be honest.
You've thought about this.
I think it's going to be about a 32 lap race. So obviously the idea will be to pit somewhere in the middle. But if you have to pit early to undercut or to get yourself out of traffic, then in the shorter races the undercut works quite well. So that'll be the plan. Otherwise, it'll just be, if you do have a lead, or a bit like the last enduro round where I did quite well there, it was run it as long as you can, and then pit, and you got the fresher tires and fuel to the end. You know what everyone's done, kind of thing.
Yep.
So
I'll call that the
you can control the rest. You can control the race. So it'll just depend on how the race goes. To be honest, see how I get off the line. These things are pretty hard to start. So we'll see how we go.
Cool. So, as I said, 3rd place off the grid for you. Looking to get a good start, hopefully. Fingers crossed. Best of luck.
Yeah, cheers. And enjoy your solo call, I guess. Hopefully get some friends soon.
I've never had friends, so this is kind of part of the course to me. That's not true. You guys are all my friends.
Thanks, mate. Talk to you soon.
So we're Scott Nolan from the Synergy Sim Racing car number 18. I think we've only got about a minute or 2 left before the start of the session. It looks like we've picked up a few extra drivers. We've got Lime Mitch and I think it's Scott. Now let me make sure to not get this wrong. Scott Murrell, that would be it. Jumping into the session as well. So we're going to have what looks like to be a 15 car grid, if I'm not mistaken. We'll see how that works out. So yes, as Scott Nolan mentioned, hour-long race. So you have the option of changing more than 2 tires. So Scott said he probably won't. It'll be interesting to see how the pit strategy changes up and down the field. I think you might see, depending on if there's a safety car or something like that, you might see someone dive in, put some more tires on, do something like that. But we'll try and I'll try and figure those things out as they're happening, because I don't know, it's hard to figure things out while it's not happening. So yeah. So where are we going with this series next? So as I mentioned, we've got 3 rounds left after tonight. In a week's time, we'll have the Oran Park GP circuit, one of my classic favorite tracks for the V8 supercars before they turned it into a parking lot, or a housing precinct rather. Then we'll have a fortnight's break before the Alton Park Island circuit, which would be a great hoot in these cars. And then the finale, a further 2 weeks after that, at Santa Cruz do Sol. So I'm not sure what's happening now. We've got a 10-minute session, but that doesn't seem to make sense. We've got some cars coming out of the pits. I think Luke Joyner, Lewis Wedding, Josh Ben's also jumping out of the pits. Mike Coulston, Brock Harvey has crashed his way out of the pits. So I'm not exactly sure what is happening. I guess we'll just roll with it. What's the worst that could happen? Yeah. So in the meantime, I guess you get to listen to more of me, which would be exciting if you're into that sort of thing. And it would be if I had anything interesting to say, really, but I really covered everything. By the way, if you are watching / listening on the YouTube, I do have the YouTube comments up. So if you want to say something to me, you can say something to me. I probably won't read it, to be fair. But at least the sentiment is there. Oh, in fact, Lewis Wedding is broadcasting his driver view. So if watch that as well, or instead, I won't be offended. You can laugh at him for cutting the track in the qualifying session. And yeah, we're just watching everyone just run around this lap. So actually, Scott said a really interesting thing there about the way the cars were handling off the curbs. Now, I'll just go through this again as I jump on board with Lewis Wedding, because I feel like he's going to demonstrate my point very nicely. If I can find him. So Lewis Wedding's just coming up to the final chicane now, and he's in the Alfa Romeo, so the car with the shortest wheelbase on the grid, besides the Lara, which only Rhodey runs, so it's not really fair to get a bit of a gauge on how that car handles when Rhodey's behind the wheel. But the Alfa Romeo, it looked like, handled the curbs pretty well. So what I mean by the curbs is that there's quite a flat curb at the start of the corners. So into turn 1 and the apex of turn 2, and also on the exit of these corners, it's got this really nice flat Vallelunga style curb that we're all familiar. But on the inside of these corners, especially the corners that you'd be wanting to take as much track as you can out of, the likes of turn 6 and the final chicane, and those sort of corners, there's the big sausage curbs, the ones that we've seen in F1 and the like. And for those watching the V8s over the weekend, the ones at the Gold Coast behind those curbs. So you can take a fair chunk of a bite out of these curbs to a point, and then you start hitting those white. In this version of the track, they're white. So there's these big white curbs. So we're just watching Lewis Wedding now come into the turn 8-9 chicane, and he gets a lot of the curb at turn 8. But in retrospect, the Alfa actually handles that quite nicely. And then with the way that turn 9 sort of is off camber and opens, it means that he's able to control the car over the flat section of the turn 9 curb and then run it out on the exit as the track bends back to the left over that flat curb on the right, sorry. So the way the cars handle the curbs is going to be imperative to making lap speed here. Now, Scott said that the Porsche didn't really like the curbs, and I noticed that on his lap. When he came up to that final chicane, it hit the curb and it really unsettled the car, and I think that might be due to it being a bit of a longer wheelbase. So and it may be something to do with how Scott's got the car set up. He might have it set up more stiffly so it doesn't really respond very nicely to hitting the curbs. And it looks like we actually do have Lime Mitch's Alfa Romeo in the server as well. So we've got another runner in that one. On the other hand, it looked like the Tiranas especially managed the curbs quite well. I think Luke Joyner and Brock Harvey both had and Termo as well, for that matter, both all had very good laps using the curbs to make lap speed. So that'll be an interesting driving difference, an interesting setup difference, and it will be interesting to see how that sort of plays out throughout the race. Because if you can take a bit more curb, especially onto, say, the front straight, it might enable you to carry a bit more speed and set up a move in those sectors. Whereas if you're trying to avoid the curbs, if you're trying to run the car a bit wider around the curbs, you might compromise your exit speed on a few of those sections. Now, another thing I'd like to mention while we've got time is actually the fact that Circuit Montreal isn't flat. Despite what you may believe, there's actually a fair bit of elevation to the track, and it's subtle enough to appear flat, but there is enough there that you actually have to concentrate on getting it right. So we're going to jump on board with Lime Mitch as he starts a lap, and we'll just go through and I'll explain what we mean as we go through each corner. So turn 1 and 2 is actually slightly downhill, especially in turn 2. So it's actually a bit of a bowl there, but it's not all that cambered up. Where the camber comes in is actually on the exit. The track actually goes up between turns 2 and 3. So you have a bit of a light moment over the crest, and then into turn 3, it's actually all downhill into turn 3 and 4. So that makes that exit out of turn 4. And I'm actually just going to stop stop where I am and get the stationary camera going so I can explain it a bit more. Getting that exit out of turn 4 is actually very, very difficult because the track's angling you out towards the wall. So it's kind of encouraging you to take more and more and more, because the more you put the power down, the more the rear is going to dig in and get you around that corner. But of course, you take a little too much, the track's going to throw you into the wall. We've seen in Formula One, in other support races around the Montreal circuit, that turn 4 wall is actually as terrifying as the Wall of Champions. And that's actually, as I mentioned at the top of the show, one of my favorite parts of racetrack in the world, not just on this circuit, because it kind of encourages you to take more curb, more track, more throttle, and more of everything. But the consequences for getting it wrong are pretty severe. Now, then going through turn 5, which really isn't that much of a corner, it's kind of a little jink to the right. That's all at the very bottom of the hill. And then you start coming back up again through turn 6. So the braking area for turn 6 is actually very kind because you're braking uphill. The problem with that, though, is that you're turning uphill as well. So the front of the car has to come against the force of gravity and the force of that turn. So you're actually susceptible to front washout, so understeer through turn 6, which makes getting the car pivoted around again for turn 7 quite difficult. You've got the opposite problem, the turn 8-9 chicane. The turn 8 braking underneath the hill is flat, if maybe slightly downhill. And then again, the run at turn 9, you're cresting downhill, if that makes sense. So as opposed to turn 4, the exit of turn 4, which is kind of scooping back up at you, when you're going out of turn 9, it's actually just beginning to drop away. So it's those subtle variations actually has a significant part to play in how you create lap speed here. And then through the hairpin's pretty flat. There's a little bit of a dip on the exit of the hairpin, but then once you get back down the back straight, it's just all flat. The Wall of Champions all flat. So the back end, sector 3 is all flat, but the first sector and the second sector, there's a subtle variation in elevation and camber, which makes it a very interesting track to drive. Now, we're still not getting going, which is a bit annoying. I'll try and figure out why. In fact, what I might do is I might abuse my admin powers. I might see if I can grab one of the admin team and see what's going on. So I'm going to grab Mike. Let's see if he's as confused as we'll be. Hello, Mike.
Hello.
You're now on the broadcast, just in case you weren't sure where you are. So what's the delay? Why are we not going racing just yet?
At the moment, we're just waiting for a couple of people to download the updates that were released through the week. We should be good to go in a couple of minutes.
Cool.
That's really where we are.
Awesome. I'm just running out of stuff to pad with. Is the problem?
Hey, look, no problem at all. Look, this is going to be a great race.